barely remember why I'm here, let alone my own name. I'm going to start with a joke. I'm just going to headline that so you know it's a joke. And I may well tell you when the punchline is so you can all laugh politely. Recently, a very popular Aberdeen man died, and his old widow wanted to make sure that as many people in the local area knew that he died, so they could pay their respects. So she went into the Aberdeen Evening Post, and she said, I'd like to put an obituary in the paper, because my husband's died recently. And the chap behind the counter said, well, how much money have you got to spend? He said, I've got £5. And he said, well, we're not going to get an awful lot for that, but we'll see what we can do. Write down what you want to say about your husband in as few words as possible, because you've only got £5. So she wrote a few words down. She said, John Reid, for Aberdeen, did. The guy behind the counter thought, well, that's a fairly abrupt way of describing an old man's life. And he said, well, look, I reckon we can squeeze in a few more words for your money. Just write a few more words down. See what you come up with. So she scribbled away on the paper, and she passed it to the guy, and she said, John Reid, for Aberdeen, deed. Vauxhall Astra for sale. Now, I do apologise for telling a joke which implies that Scots people are mean. I should be very, very careful about stereotyping, and I do remember a recent letter written to the editor of the Daily Record, and it said, if you don't stop telling jokes in your newspaper about Scots people being mean, I shall stop borrowing your newspaper. But the portrait of the Aberdonian widow is probably not one. It's an unfair reflection of Scottish womanhood and womanhood in general, because we all know that you're perfect women, ladies. It's certainly not a portrait that Robbie Burns would have recognised, because he loved the Lassies a lot, as often as he could, day and night, in or out of wedlock. In fact, I think it's probably fair to say he was the Michael Douglas of 18th century Scotland. So that's probably why he fathered 13 children, 2 sets of twins, had an affair with his mother's servant, was chased across Scotland by the angry father of a woman with whom he was going to have 9 children, and also tried to whisk a lassie off to the Caribbean. And he was quite open about this. In a letter to Dr. John Moore in 1787, he wrote, but far beyond all the other impulses of my heart was un penchant à l'adorable moitié du genre humain. Now that last bit is Scottish for a leaning towards the adorable half of mankind. And perhaps more eloquently, he wrote, the captive bands may chain the hands, but love enslaves the man. Ye gallant bra a read ya are, beware, O bonny Anne. Anne, Peggy, Nellie, Jenny, Mary, Jean, Anna, I could go on. In fact, I've researched this, and Robbie Burns wrote about 73 different women in his poems. That wasn't including his wife or his daughters. He also wrote a number of poems about womanhood in general, because he wanted to keep his options open. Although he was scorned by polite society for his philandering ways, I genuinely believe that Robbie loved all the women in his life and drew inspiration from them. In fact, were it not for the Lassies, it's fair to say that 10,000 people probably wouldn't have turned up for his funeral when he died. I mean, he really was a pop star. In fact, he probably would have loved one of these if he'd been doing his poetry 300 or 400 years ago. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the Lassies, we wouldn't be here tonight celebrating the great bard's memory. It reminds me of a story. One night, pause here. This is a story about, it sounds a lot better when you have President Obama and his wife Michelle. I was going to put Alex Salmond in it, but I don't know if Alex Salmond is married. He is married. Is it a happy marriage? Yes. A very happy marriage. For your benefit, I'll change the story. One night, Alex Salmond and his wife, what's her name? Mrs. Salmond. Mrs. Salmond. Went out for a meal. They normally go to very posh restaurants, as everyone knows, but they thought, tonight we're going to go to a nice, quiet neighbourhood restaurant. We're going to have a quiet evening. And halfway through the meal, the owner of the restaurant said, can I have a quiet word with Mrs. Salmond? Before I go any further, is she quite attractive?
Yeah, probably do, yeah.
Good, okay, right. Can I have a quiet word with Mrs. Salmond, please? And Alex said, yeah, of course, that's fine. Off you go and have a word. And she came back and said, what was all that about? And she said, well, this chap was at school with me. He said, well, I had a massive crush on you when you were a teenager. I really, really fancied you, Mrs. Salmond. And Alex said, well, that's very nice then, because if you hadn't met me and we hadn't got married, then you would have been the joint owner of a really lovely restaurant. And she said, no. He would have been First Minister of Scotland. Now that's a story that you probably could have told about Rabbie Brown's, but to be honest, it would have had to be in a pretty large restaurant to fit all the women in his life into. Now Andrew's already said thank you to the remarkable lassies who helped out tonight, and I'll echo that thanks. We had some wonderful food, thanks to Karen, Margaret, Helen, Anna, sounds like the list of Robbie Burns poems actually, Liz, Kim, Kate, Sue and Edith. The dancing, which I'm sure we're all going to enjoy in a few moments' time. To the choreographer Helen, thank you very much indeed. To the music, Emily, thank you very much indeed. And I'll say this next thanks. It's a conditional thanks, because Kylene is going to respond to my toast to the lassies. If it's a nice toast, thanks ever so much, Kylene, you're very kind. If it's not, I withdraw that thanks. If I missed anybody out, I'm sorry. But Rabbie's love for the lassies is probably best summarised in this excerpt from Green Grow the Rashido. And that's top tip for anybody poets here. If you want to make things rhyme, just put O at the end of the line and it works beautifully. But anyway, the sweetest hours that here I spend are spent among the lassies, oh. And I challenge any man among you to deny it. Now gentlemen, at this point, be up on your feet please. Charging lassies. To the lassies. To the lassies.